What's going on? Okay, the entire premise of this video is off of a comment that I got on one of my other ones call from Mr. Darth Gravy. He says, "I'm curious, what kind of changes would you make to the warrior class in general and to the specs specifically? Like spear feels like a pretty rough capstone, and having down at the end of the tree doesn't feel good to me class wise. And I'd love to get some new kind of ability that could be added down there. I don't really know the DPS specs well as I know prot, but arms feel stranded between single target and AoE. Very true. And Fury feels like a stat stick to play. I guess I'm trying to ask, what would you do to the class to improve quality? Wow, holy wow! I speak for a living. Uh, what I'm trying to ask is, what would you do to the class to improve quality of life and give warriors some spice? I also don't speak for a living, but I do like customer service shit. Um, and wait, do I even have the brought up? Yeah, now you can. Okay, now you can. Very good question. The line "Fury feels like a stat stick to play" is hilarious and incredibly accurate because you essentially do the same thing and you're just literally meat grinding your way through things using the stats you have. So I think that's really good. Um, but when I think about But before I go into like specifically warrior, what I think about when I think of what the class roles are in a game like this in an MMO, I see the tanks as the controllers, the DPS as the threat neutralization. So like like prio damaging, individual kicks and stuns and that kind of thing. And I see the healers as the overall like mitigation and basically keeping the group healthy. I think it's good for every class to have stuff like we have spell reflection and impending victory, which are incredible tools in our base kit, which do a lot to help us be more have a lot more agency in our health bar depending on what's going on. But I think especially our capstones in the base tree need a little something personally. I'm fine with Roar being basically just damage, and it has its bleed. It works better with arms because of a talent in arms called Bloodletting. But I'm fine with Roar being the way it is. Maybe you could add like an AoE slow to it, like a slight slow to it on top of that for like PvP applications. But here's the problem. The problem is what I'm going to talk about in this video and all of my ideas are all focused on PvE. I play PvP, but all of my ideals are focused on the PvE side of the game. And the issue is, it's not the only side of the game, right? And that's not necessarily a problem, as in we should get rid of PvP, but that's more of a difficulty in finding solutions, right? Because you look at a talent here that leads into Shockwave, which is stamina increased by 5% and the duration of Fear Sap and incapacitate effects on you is reduced by 10%. This is just a PvP talent. They expect you to go towards Shockwave to have more CC, but this is basically a PvP and a tank specific talent. So they're like, you know what? Tanks are going to go here. PvP is probably going to go here. Let's just give them more stam. We're good, right? Because the way they've designed them help all types of game modes, right? And I think it's very difficult. I do not envy their jobs in designing around PvE and PvP at the same time. We have these PvP talents, but I honestly don't know if this is enough, or they might need to even be like those new hero talents they're adding, where you have a block. Maybe that's something they need more for PvP, and then they can really split what these talents do for PvP and PvE. But it's very difficult to actually balance. But instead of thinking about all of the differences and difficulties and all that, I'm just going to talk purely PvE, right? Purely PvE, because that's really what I care about. Shockwave, right? Shockwave is a very weird thing because a lot of other classes, like you look at DH and they have, like, if we were to, let's just do that, right? We can do that. We're here. Like, we can look at their class tree and look how early in their tree Chaos Nova is. So they can take their stun very early on. They don't have to go to a capstone to get their AoE C. They also have another AoE C, a single target incapacitate. Simply put, warriors do not have the utility other DPS have. And they have their single target stun baseline, you know? So I think these trees would probably need to be redesigned from the ground up. But if we kept these things, what could they be? Like I said, I think Roar as just a pure damage option, with maybe a slow effect or something could be interesting. But I think Spear should have an option to silence during the duration, and Shockwave within the Shockwave cone. I think for a small amount of time, maybe 3 seconds or so. I don't know how long it would be, but that small area that Shockwave covers, it should one of these talents instead, like this increased damage and always crit. Who cares? Um, Instead of that, why not have the talent here be the ground rumbles and then enemies have their cast interrupted for the next like four for the next like 3 to 4 seconds, something like that. And then we would actually have something not necessarily the same as like a silent sigil or a shield bouncing around doing kicks, right? But we still have a class specific way to roll those. Prot sincerely lacks utility. I think it does good damage. And I don't think Prot is like bad by any means. Like you can look at Pika TV. He's a very good Prot warrior. He puts videos out, that kind of thing. But I think that it lacks in the control utility that a lot of other classes have. Like imagine if a Prot warrior was able to take Spear of Bastion and Shockwave. So now they're getting their little AoE rumbling every 40 seconds, right? Maybe you could increase the cooldown, so maybe it's every minute you're able to use it, but it's in a small area. Um, and they could take something like Fear of Bastion, right? So if they decided they wanted to have a lot more control instead of maybe the extra damage and a little bit more survivability of these capstones comparatively, what if you could have silence and that rumbling, right? That might be good and that might be interesting. But what if you need to live more? What if it's like a tyrannical week? Crash dies, it's not so bad. Okay, maybe we can go into more of our big survivability, big buffer options, right? That is a more interesting choice, I think, for a class like Prot. And it also provides an interesting choice and availability and utility for the DPS specs as well. I'm not sure what I would change in Prot class wise specifically in their tree because I just don't know enough about it. But I think working to provide more general utility in the warrior tree here would be a major boon. Because, like, you look at a talent like here, Shattering Throw is a 3 minute cooldown. And so warriors had something to do against incorporeal. Now we can use a talent point to deal with an incorporeal every. That's like what is that? And that's terrible. Like it might as well not exist because no one's going to use that. It's terrible. And on top of our talent point economy, it's just worthless. Okay? I like the idea of giving us the option if necessary, but it's just not good enough, right? So the potential of having some of these things be more utility focused, I think would go a long way for the class as a whole. But like I said, I can't talk too much about Prot because I just don't know enough about it. Um, I don't really have enough good ideas for that. So we're going to swap over and talk about Fury a little bit. Because personally, I think when Fury's meta is anger management and you're getting your Ravagers out, you're casting a bunch more recklessness, right? You have a high recklessness uptime. Um, and I really think Fury feels like Fury Warrior when the class to me has always seemed like a mid combat in battle, like a meat grinder. You're always in there. You're not doing big crazy bursts, right? But you're always in there and you're always chalking it up. We have the talents called Meat Cleaver. I really like when Fury is anger management. I think currently with its reckless abandon play style, having it swapped up from the gear sets is actually kind of fun. Um, and interesting. But I really, as far as like the normal gameplay of it, having Fury feel and play more like a short cooldown throughput class, I think really fits its style and aesthetic, and they're close. They could probably adjust a few things here, but like changing single-minded fury to a passive tree, a talent in the tree, like you just have it, and then let people do that if they want to. I don't think single-minded fury will ever be as good as Titan's grip, just because of the stat loss, dam loss, and the reduced auto attack damage. I just don't think it's as good. It doesn't have to be. Just let people have it be an option. I don't know. Maybe Fury Warrior specifically can T-Mog one-handed swords and two-handed swords. I mean, shit, man. We don't get an extra 3 yards like every other class. I mean, rogues have little baby daggers and they have more range than we do. So why not just let us T-Mog stuff into one-handers? It's not like seeing someone with a two-hander equipped means they have more range. Um, that's my small rant about acrobatic strike. But I think if we get rid of these two talents, have some more interesting ones come in, make single-minded fury baseline, and that would really go to filling out three in a better place. But I like as it stands. Going into once again, let's say we gave up damage for more utility, like doing instead of doing big AoE damage, right? If we could have the utility of spear, that would be really good. But I think what Fury actually needs as well is this. I mean, look, man, improve whirlwind. This needs to be uncapped. If they want it to do strike to 4 additional targets for 55% damage, okay, cool, whatever. I think this thing needs to work like most other good AO good classes, where it does the same damage up to 4 targets, but does reduced damage after. Like if they want it to be like a 5 target class, but it does reduced damage to everything else, sure, cool, man. I'm cool with that. But it's a significant problem for this class that you pull a big pack of mobs because you need to pull a big pack of mobs, and then after your essentially your roar is over, you're just not doing any damage. But imagine, right? Imagine a world where improve whirlwind, because we have to spend a global on it, right? It's not just in our base kit. We're not demon hunters. We don't have Bell Rush, Blade Dance, Immo Aura, Rage Fire, Eye Beam, the Fell Devastation talent, Throglaive bouncing around, the Hunt applying to a crazy amount of target. Like we don't have all of these. Like we're just hitting stuff. So I think it should actually hit everything near us and then do reduced damage beyond X targets. But imagine a world where it's like, okay, well, we're doing that. Now we have some damage. But if we want to do more damage, okay, we can take our roar talents. But if we want to be more tactical, what if we did a little less AoE damage, but now we had Spear of Bastion? It's more prio damage, more boss damage. If it had that talent where it's silenced, now you have group utility. It would do a little grip. It would have group utility. It would be a 1.5 minute cooldown silence, but you could use it and play around it and be efficient around it. It would be cool. Maybe even if you're playing Fury currently, like we go down to Shockwave, what if we took another point out of that and just had another point to do that little rumbly shit I was talking about, where that area would interrupt casts for a certain amount of time. That kind of utility would go so long, like such a long way for our class. And one of the reasons why we don't even want to look at something like Spear of Bastion inside of Mythic Plus, for example, is because it provides no utility. We only do damage to 5 mobs with it. And I still think it should do less damage than Thunderous Roar, but having that as an option and having it silence in a PvE environment would be really good, really cool, and go a long way for our viability. Um, in terms of like Mythic Plus, and adding something like that would not affect our raid that much. I mean, currently with how these fights are designed, like there are ads, like even if there's like a ton of ads, most of the time it's either an ad fight and it doesn't matter, or you're getting like 3 or 4 ads that you're dealing with that are somewhat important. Like let's talk about Fyrak, right? Where Fyrak has the 2 big Colossus and then a bunch of little ads. So let's say you're still being able to cleave off those little ads because Improved Whirlwind is doing that spread cleave, right? But even if you're hitting like 6 targets, you're still doing primarily prio damage to the main big ad, the big bull. That's what Fury has always been good at, which is prio damage and side cleave. But I think its side cleave needs to become uncapped and just do reduced damage beyond X target. because currently it feels far too restrictive. We're forced into these cooldown windows where we're only really able to play these big AoE talents just to try and do as much damage as uncapped damage as possible, to retain some sort of viability. Arms has a bit better options in terms of that, but I want to do something completely different in Arms. But moving on to Arms, here is where I think the real cook. I think Arms needs to change. I think Arms should move. Right now, we have our Rage Bar, right? Which is basically a cosmetic Rage Bar. It's almost always full, and we're just hitting buttons and it fills up. And then in execute phase, managing your rage actually matters. But right now, the way Arms works, it just works against itself, especially with the tier set where we're getting additional sudden death procs, and we have Test of Might in our build. We're getting these sudden death procs. They don't work with Test of Might, but if we don't spend them, we're not getting the bleed and the bonus from our tier set, and then our 2 sets less valuable because we're not just slamming execute on hit. Execute itself also has a problem where the ability is delayed. If you want to test this, you can literally walk at max melee range, hit the execute button on a mob, and just walk and backpedal, and your character will go and just do nothing, right? You actually won't hit anything. Because execute has a big wind up, it has a delay until it even does damage. It feels kind of bad, especially when a pack is moving around and you hear the animation of Massacre going because it sounds like the condemn sound effect, but it just keeps going off, but you're doing no damage because things are moving around, or maybe one of them went behind you. It's bad. It feels bad. I don't like it at all, and that needs to be looked at. But here's my real cook. Arms needs not necessarily combo points, but it needs an energy bar and an essence meter. Because evokers have their that's a bit like evokers have their essence meter, right? Where they have these little pips that they spend on things. And here's where the cook begins. Welcome to my kitchen. This is what Arm should be. Arm should be a burst centric class, and maybe they can do something interesting as well, where if in the Arms tree, because we're playing around big windows, potentially Arms can have a talent that makes Avatar have a 3-minute cooldown, do double the damage, and have the cost of this new resource here. This resource, I don't know what I would call it, or instead of rage, this should be like metal or prowess or martial or some thing, right? Some battle related thing, right? I don't know what these would be called. Like these points, maybe they could just be literally called medals. So like, here's your martial, here's your or here's your metal, and by metal I mean like METTLE, like metal, and this here I mean like metals, like MEDAL, like actual metal. Um, because I think warrior should become, or arms warrior should become a very big bursty class, but it should have these essence window spenders. So think of it like this, and the main idea I drew this is it should be more of a tactician class, right? Where you're slowly getting bleeds into the enemy, you're slowly wearing them down. I think the arms mastery should work almost in reverse to how devastation evokers work, where they do more damage the higher the enemy's health is, but they do less damage as the fight goes on. Whereas I think arms, to keep its execute niche as well as working towards that goal and that idea, as a tactician, you're wearing down the enemy, you're breaking pieces of the armor, you're slowly bleeding them out with deep wounds and rends and that kind of thing. And its mastery should do more damage to the enemy as its health gets lower. It should be tuned kind of like Dev, where it's not like if the boss isn't low health, it's worthless, and if the boss is high health, you're doing nothing. So I think there's a balance to be there, but I think that could go way into the almost tactician or potentially executioner style gameplay. But getting into the Monster Hunter themes, this is where these little points come into play, right? Imagine you've set up your stuff, you've got your martial prowess stacks, your mortal strike is going to be do this big hit, you have everything set up, you're good to go, but you have these stacks. But instead, what if arms became more like a melee caster too, right? Here's a cook, like a melee caster. So imagine, you know how evokers have their fire breath and they have the little ticks of how much essence spending and what they do. Thing for arms work. But like Monster Hunter, imagine we're using a two-handed weapon, right? So imagine the fucking great sword combo that the game has. Boom, two, three, boom, right? So we have these big points that we can spend on these combos. But what if, like, if we take the talent that Avatar has a maybe not a shorter duration, but Avatar halves the cost of these metal points, and then does you do an increased amount of damage, but it's a 3-minute cooldown. So you're setting up these huge fucking windows in these 3-minute intervals, right? And then your other cooldowns can maybe be 1.5 instead to go alongside that. So you have shorter burst cooldowns that you can use in between depending on what the fight requires. But imagine you pop your avatar, you hit a Colossus Smash, which is an ability traditionally that is, I think it was originally an armor pen ability, right? Before they removed it, where you're doing all of this extra bonus damage. And let's say you get into execute, you pop all your shit, you're going in there, and then you're like a motherfucking great sword wielder in Monster Hunter. You can sit there, Mortal Strike, 1, 2, 3, bah! And then you can queue up another one. 1, 2, 3, bah! But because it's only costs half, you only use 3. Now you have now you have 3 left. But you're an execute, right? So you want to use execute. I think execute should have a bigger cooldown, but it should be this really big hit that you built, because you have stuff like fatality and martial prowess and executor's precision. I think could be interesting if it worked in reverse, or it worked both ways, where mortal strikes increase execute damage and executes increase mortal strike damage. So you have kind of a feedback loop, especially in the execute window. But imagine you get these big hits and you have this huge execute coming in at the end of your avatar window, and you just fucking slaughter something. You do, like, I don't know, let's say you're fighting a boss and you legitimately, after popping a 3-minute cooldown with everything rolling and you're blasting it, and you do a literal 1% health of the boss's HP with this massive fucking execute. I think it would be so fucking cool. I think it would be really awesome, because your normal abilities would be like energy, right? Where you would hit, it would spend, and it would replenish while you're doing other things. Like, let's say you replenished a little bit amount of energy or amount of your metal or whatever while you're overpowering, right? Because overpowering and rending and getting deep wounds on the target is where you're like picking away and chipping at the armor and finding a weakness, and then you find a weakness and you have these little burst windows where you can hit like your mortal strikes. I don't know how the gameplay would flow exactly, but but let's say within those avatar windows are let's say within, I don't know, within those avatar windows is when you really charge up those big hits. Or maybe you're able to charge, like Evoke, you're able to charge up as much as you want, so you can still have a little bit of extra gameplay managing these orbs, or managing this extra resource, and then you can pool shit to get ready for your next cooldown window. So maybe, so like your Colossus Smash could be, I don't know if it would still be 45 seconds. Maybe it would be. Um, but you could have these Colossus Smash windows. Maybe it might need another smaller, like instead of Skull Splitter, maybe the class as it's redesigned could have a smaller, like 1.5 minute for cooldown window. So you have your big window at the start and a big window set up at the end at like the 6-minute mark. But in between, you still have these little windows, so it's not like you're doing everything and then doing nothing. I think it would be really interesting and a lot of fun. I don't know if people would enjoy the Monster Hunter, I don't, maybe it shouldn't root you in place, but something like Fell Devastation from Vengeance Demon Hunter, where you can still move a little bit, it just slows you while you're racking up this big hit. Maybe that would make people feel a bit better about it. But I think realistically, Arms needs to move away from the builder spender. Like Fury. I think Fury should be the builder spender. I think it's fine that Prot retains that rage mechanic and ignore pain, and I think it's thematical with that. But I think Arms should be looked at like the calm tactician in these big burst. Arms used to have an ability called Deadly Calm. Oh, that was way, way back when. Um, but I think it would be really, really cool. I think it would really add a lot of flavor. I think different classes could have different abilities, or it could have their different like feelings, right? Different cooldown windows, different style of gameplay. Like even something like Blade Storm, which is very iconic, right? It's very iconic for Arms. What if, much like you're cranking up your big Mortal Strikes, um, executes that kind of thing, the Blade Storm could also be charged up. So, like, let's say you're getting into a pack, you have four of your metal, you have four of those points to spend, and you go, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to T clap, I'm going to spread these bleeds, and then I'm going to spend 3 points, crank, 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 almost like a Beyblade top, and then you fucking let it rip. And then after every point you spend, so every little bar that you fill, because the evoker bar, like the evoker cast bar is like this, but each point is segmented, right? And they all do different things. Like you have, I think you've got like the red color, the blue color. You got the red color, you got the blue color. Got like this more neutral gray where you're not really spending much of anything. Or maybe this could be more orange, and just the more you're putting points into it, the more ferocious your attack is. And then if you hold it for too long or you're delaying it, this could just be like, I don't know, like a burnout window or something. Um, but this would go way towards the flavor of what Arms could be. I think it'd be really interesting. I don't know if maybe having Mortal Strike, having the but bam, might not be great. Maybe you should keep it now as it is. Maybe you should reverse something like Executioner's Precision, where your Mortal Strikes are you doing these big hits, but then you have other spells that you can spend these points on, but executes really that big hit that would feel super satisfying and have a decent cooldown, and then you can build and play around it, and I think it'd be a lot of fun. Um, but obviously, these are all just plain ideas. Um, I don't know how well it would work. I don't know how well it would balance with P and P. I think there would be a significant amount of difficulty also getting people, especially players of melee like me, to have essentially what is a cast bar in melee. But I think it could be very interesting. It could be very unique. One of the reasons why I think people that play Rogue like Rogue a lot is sub assassination and outlaw feel very different from each other and do very different things, but they have their own niches that is very good for them. So that's my like fucking armchair developer paper napkin math idea for arms. I think it would be I can say I think or I would or I could or it should. I just, even if it doesn't become that, um, what I really think the class does need overall is more utility here in its class tree. Maybe you just completely change Shockwave, move it up here or something. I don't know. Um, I'm not sure exactly what I would want to add as a capstone personally because they're supposed to be powerful. But these are at least my general ideas on kind of what I feel that at, that some of these classes effects. Um, Arms by far needs the help, and I think that the biggest problem Arms has is its its resource management doesn't feel good. Its gameplay doesn't feel like it's a tactician. It feels like literally you're just trying to hit Mortal Strike as many times as you can, try and reset it as many times as you can. Um, Even in execute phase, but because of executioner's precision, you're still trying to, instead of just hitting execute, you're hitting execute, execute, Mortal Strike. Like it's, but those executes are buffing the Mortal Strike instead of Mortal Strike buffing the execute, which is the actual big ability. Um, I think Arms has just lost a lot of flavor. I don't think it has a very tactician styled gameplay at all, and it needs an immense amount of work to get it to actually like I think it should. But once again, this is all my own personal opinion. Um, these are things that I think would be cool. However, whether or not they're viable design wise, PvP wise, encounter wise, I'm not sure. Um, I would need a lot more time to actually test some of the things, it to be more than just an idea that's bouncing around my head, right? But what do you think? What do you think arms should be? What do you? I think it's more interesting in terms of class fantasy, and they're obviously going for class fantasy. About how you feel these classes should be. Do you think Fury should be the meat grinder or the burst window? Right? Do you think arms should be the consistent throughput? Arm should be, I don't know, like a full on bleed class instead. Well, I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? Because I am but one internet man, and having other internet people say, "Hey, man, what about this?" Would be cool. And seeing those ideas, I think so. Yeah, that is my cook. As far oh, also something Arms needs is if Fury's going to retain be as durable as it is, I think Arms needs something more than fueled by violence. Arms needs actual passive damage reduction. Maybe something like how Prot has it. Well, Prot doesn't have it, but the current tier set for Prot, when you consume a bleed with your shield slam, it gives you a damage reduction. Maybe fueled by violence shouldn't be healing. It should just be enemies who are affected by your deal 10% less or something like that. I don't know. Because Arms definitely has a survivability issue in a variety uh, of different content compared to Fury. And something like that would probably go a long way because Arms, we also have the ability to always swap into defensive stance. It does kind of homogenize the damage reduction that we get with Warpaint, where Warpaint is while enraged, but I think it would work a little bit differently, or maybe or it should work a little bit differently. That I think it should actually have some damage reduction or shielding or something compared to just being healed. Because healing, while healing is good, the major problem with healing is that it doesn't matter how much you heal if your health bar goes from 100 to 0. What's more important is that your health bar goes from 100 to 84, 85, or 85%, right? Like you go down to 10% health. So as long as you're not dead, you can still play the game, you can heal yourself, that kind of thing. But Arms certainly has a very large survivability problem compared to Fury currently. But that's just what I'm feeling, man. That's just how I'm feeling about it. It's been 30 over 30 goddamn minutes talking. Damn, I wasn't even watching. So yeah, let me know. Thank you for watching. Maybe we can do another cook session like this together and have different ideas. I think it'd be but yeah, thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye bye.